education. You're trying to give the young people something that will help them. Yet you don't know exactly what it ought to be.
Welcome to the Teach Thought Podcast. Our mission is to rethink what's possible, teaching and learning in a modern context. Join your classroom to the Teach Thought movement and be a part of the change.
Today I speak to James Sturtevant. James is the author of the book, You've Got to Connect, Building Relationships that Lead to Engaged Students, Productive Classrooms, and Higher Achievement. James is a social studies teacher with a BA in History and Political Science from Muskingum University and an MA in History from Ohio State University. I hope you enjoy my conversation with James. Okay, good afternoon, James Sturtevant. How are you this morning, or afternoon rather?
Well, it's morning, Terry, and it's raining, and it's Christmas shopping time. It just doesn't seem right with the rain out here in Ohio at Christmas time. It should be snow. What can I say? I'm doing great.
15 years ago, I would have been wanting snow, but I'm getting old and I'm fine with it warm, to be perfectly honest. But I can do without the rain. It's a good day for ducks here.
Yeah, yes, sir. So, long answer to a short question. I'm doing just great. It's Christmas vacation, so I'm sitting in my classroom, but it's empty, which is unusual. Pretty quiet too.
But you can get some stuff done.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. What are you working on this Christmas break?
I'm working on a new presentation platform called Movely. And I'm sure we'll get into this conversation a little later on. I teach a college class. All my presentations are flipped and on YouTube, and it's been a lot of fun. And I am right now in the process learning this Movely platform, which is really cool because it's incredibly easy to upload it to YouTube, whereas some other platforms it hasn't been that easy. It's easy to put voiceovers on. It's easy to put images on. It's easy to do animations. So I'm actually having a lot of fun here this Monday morning.
Before we get into that, why don't we introduce you to the audience, and who are you and what do you do? What do you care about? And
sure.
Yeah, give us the backstory.
This is my 31st year as a public educator, which is absolutely hard for me to fathom that I've been doing this long, but the decades kind of roll by. I teach in a large public high school in suburban Columbus, Ohio. It's called Big Walnut, like the tree, like a really big walnut tree. I teach ninth grade global studies, and to my juniors and seniors, I teach a college class through a local community college called Columbus State. It's dual enrollment, which is a pretty sweet deal for our students because they don't have to mess with an AP test. Because I have a master's degree in history, I'm a volunteer adjunct through Columbus State. So Columbus State gets a great deal, and my students get a great deal. They get 3 college credit hours for $75. You just can't beat that.
I remember in high school I got a couple of credit hours for things, and I didn't understand for 5 years why that was a good thing.
Well, I don't know if they appreciate it yet, but I've had some kids come back and say, boy, I'm glad I took care of that with you. And I have a lot of kids that are science and math kids that don't want to mess with humanities much when they get to college. And boy, they're great students. I mean, they're a lot of fun to have in class.
And so what do you teach in that dual enrollment class? What is the content?
Well, it's an excellent content. It is it's the ancient history of China, India, the Middle East and Africa, and Mesoamerica. The only white face in the class, the only white face in the curriculum is mine.
Tell me something cool about Mesoamerica.
Well, you know something? When the Spaniards came over, Mesoamerica was like a time capsule. Because it was isolated geographically, they really didn't have any interaction with other great civilizations. So when these Spaniards came there, in the 1500s, they just thought it was like a dream, but in many ways they were more advanced than the Western Europeans in some ways, certainly from a mathematical and scientific standpoint. So it's just a really, really, really rich, cool, beautiful, colorful place to study.
Yeah, it sounds like it. What sort of projects, assignments are you doing in that class?
Well, I'm glad we're talking about this because I'm passionate about it. We do almost everything through blogging. And I always, my goal in having my students blog is to have them do something, not just have them, write their feelings about the month of December or something like that. I want them to have them do a hands-on activity, and then I want them to include that activity in their blog via video or audio or images. And so for Mesoamerica, we did this together. We had them recreate their name in Mayan glyphs, and they had to do some research on Mayan glyphs, which are incredibly complex, and then they had to create these images and then include them on their podcasts. On their blog. I've also had them do podcasts, and I've had them do a lot of physical things. Like for Taoism, we took a long walk in nature. For Buddhism, we made a great meal and ate it consciously with our families. So I have them do these activities. They have to do something. It's not just a writing things down. And then I have them reflect on those activities.
That sounds like a dream course to teach.
You know something? It's interesting you say that, Terry, because I called the state teachers retirement system in Ohio back in October, and I said, okay, I've been doing this a while. When can I retire? And they said last week. And I can tell you when I was 40-something, I looked at retirement and I thought, retirement sounds pretty good. I'd kind of like to drift on out to pasture and let my day unfold in front of me and do whatever the heck I want. And now it's staring me straight in the face, and I'm like, I'm not ready. I ain't going to go. And so that's been really cool and totally unexpected.
What do you attribute that kind of shift in your perspective as an educator?
Fear of mortality.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it. And then I just couldn't imagine losing this interaction with these really cool kids every day. I mean, they're my social life. I hate to say that, but that's where I get my energy, coming in and talking about them, about how bad the Cleveland Browns are, and about what's a cool movie to go see and where they go out to eat. And I thrive in that situation. It's like oxygen to me.
And it sounds like some of the newer ways that you're experimenting with teaching, podcasting and blogging and some of the projects and general connections. I'm guessing this is serving to re-hone and revitalize your craft.
Well, and I'll tell you that when I started teaching in the summer of 1985, we wrote things on a chalkboard. It's changed.
Oh yeah.
And it's changed for the better. I mean, I've had a lot of people say, "Boy, how do you put up with the kids these days?" And I think that's baloney. I mean, I think kids are pretty much like they've always been, man. And I can tell you that technology has opened the world up for my students, myself. We did a Socratic circle not long ago. I have a good friend from LA that I was on his podcast. We put him on my smartboard projector. He participated in the Socratic circle. That would have been unheard of, just a few years ago. But with Skype and the internet, it's no problem, man.
Let's look closer at that for a moment. This idea that a lot of teachers think that, and I've even honestly had this thought myself as a teacher, that it would have been easier to teach 30 or 40 years ago before pressure and before classrooms kind of became pressure cookers. Now I think that really depends on your perspective and where you teach and
Sure.
the community, and so it's different in one community than another, and one department or even one grade level than another. But in general, I've always wondered what it would have been like to teach a class without, I guess, a lot of standardization,
Sure.
and without that kind of pressure, and to bring a little bit more art to the science of teaching, and balance that out a little bit better. So tell me then, because I wasn't there, or I was there learning but not as a teacher, what was teaching like in the 80s?
Well, I think that there was, positives and negatives. I mean, we've lost our mind on standardized testing. I mean, just gone insane with it. But the teachers are better today. I mean, you young teachers are better. than the older teachers. And I know that goes against conventional wisdom, but I can tell you that the students at Big Walnut High School, and I'm certain it's the same in Louisville, Kentucky, are getting a better education now than they've ever received. I mean, when I was in high school, it was pretty easy. and we demand a lot more out of our kids now. Now that's the positive side. The downside is we have to be very careful that we remember that this is a people business, and our students are not data points. And we get so wrapped up in the manufacturing process of learning, that we forget the child, quite frankly, today. So I think that, we talk a lot about personalization. We talk a lot about differentiation, but I do think there was more recognition back when I started teaching about the importance of the student-teacher bond. So I would say that's the downside. So I think in many ways the instruction level is better today, but I think that the education industry tends to look at kids more like commodities today, which is sad. How's that?
What can teachers do to sort of mitigate that possibility and sort of humanize their teaching, and so that the learning becomes more human for the student?
Well, Terry, that's what I'm all about, man. My mission in life is to help teachers build those strong relationships with students. And just as a little segue, in 31 years in the classroom, I've been subjected to a lot of professional development. And I have to tell you that, some of it's been really boring, but some of it has transformed me as an educator. I just made a list. I've been in service on differentiation, rubrics, summative assessments, formative assessments, think, pair, share, self-directed learning, professional learning communities, creation of teacher websites, bring your own technology, flipped classrooms, essential questions, and everybody's talking about project-based learning now. I mean, these things have really helped me as a teacher. But Terry, I don't remember one time in my entire career an administrator standing before my colleagues and myself and saying, hey, today we're going to work on building stronger relationships with students, which to me is just amazing that no one would ever look at this as something important and something that needs to be addressed. Now, I wrote a book in 2015 called You've Got to Connect. And it's all about giving teachers how-tos to help them build stronger and stronger relationships with kids. And it was designed to fill this void, like give people some direction on how they can build these relationships. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting is right after my book came out, a local school leader read it and was enthusiastic, gave me a call and says, I want you to get familiar with a researcher called John Hattie. I didn't know who John Hattie was. He's a famous researcher and author from Australia. He wrote a book in 2008 called Visible Learning, which is very popular among a lot of education professionals. So I was really interested as to why this guy told me to check out this book, and I felt it probably had to do with something that I was promoting, and it certainly did. The heart of John Hattie's work is a list of 138 influences on student learning, and number one is self-reported grades. Apparently, kids do wonderful if you give them the rubric and have them work through their own assignment. And I've certainly seen that at work. Number 138 is student mobility. And in this case, we're talking about a kid that moves into your class on October 1st and then she's gone on November 1st. That's devastating to that child's intellectual development. Terry, student-teacher relationships came in 11th place. Far ahead of a lot of things that we might think are more important. Far ahead of everything on that list that I've been in service on. Not to say that stuff's not important, but we don't emphasize the importance of these relationships enough in public education, and my book was designed to help fill that void.
What are some ways that teachers can establish and build those relationships?
I'll give you a very simple one right now. You think about your class, you walk into your class, many of those kids are standoffish. Many of those kids are not inclined to have a relationship with you. You have very little control over that, but what you do is you have some control over your approachability. So one of the things that I promote in my book and promote whenever I present anywhere is very simple, low-risk thing that you can do as a teacher. Just tell some stories about yourself. Just some basic stories about how your weekend went or what you did in the last 24 hours. Good example was we have this custodian in my school who's very popular with the students, really funny guy. And he walked into my class after school one day, and I just showed him a picture of a brand new dog that I adopted. He takes a look at this dog and says, "That's a really cute looking dog, but you need to get that dog's toenails trimmed." So this guy's wife just opened up a dog grooming salon. Like I could see where this was headed, but I was like, "Okay, George, I'll take my dog to your wife's salon." So took lots of pictures of my dog in the car, took pictures of all the dogs in the salon, took a picture of my dog suspended in midair like a 57 Chevy getting his toenails trimmed.
Hey, you got to be quiet there.
Showed this to my students the next day in class. Showed these like 5 or 6 images, told them a little story about going over there. Took just about a minute or two in class. Didn't take much instructional time or anything. After class, Terry, a little girl who had never said a word all year comes walking up to me and with a trembling hand holds up her smartphone and says, "Mr. Sturtevant, let me show you a picture of my dog." Now that an incredible magic breakthrough wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have taken just a couple minutes out of class to share some stupid little story about what happened to me over the last 24 hours. So in other words, I became approachable to this young person. And that was just one example. I probably do this on a probably tri-weekly basis. And you're going to have some kids that put up their hands and say, "This is stupid. What does this have to do with history?" or something like that. You just identified the kid you need to work on a relationship with.
Yeah, good point.
And what I've experienced is that outgoing kid that's complaining a week later is the kid that's showing you a picture of his dog as well. So that's just one example of how a teacher can take what's in their control and become more approachable. Something else I talk a lot about in my book is oh my gosh, your ego. Oh, your ego. Your ego as the teacher can be a major obstacle between you and forming relationships with these students. And I know that we're a little pressed for time here, but I can give you a very quick story about how I learned this the hard way. When I first started teaching back in the dawn of my career, I was at this school, which was an urban school, it was a poor school, and a lot of my kids were African-American kids. All of them were poor kids. I was some guy that had a master's degree from Ohio State University. I'm all gung-ho about my subject. I come driving in there the first day, ready to set the world on fire. And Terry, these kids wanted nothing to do with me, nothing. And in retrospect, I came on way too strong, and I was as alien to them as they were to me, to be quite honest. And over the very difficult month of September and October, when I felt like I was just striking out with these students and having no impact on them whatsoever, one day, I don't know why I did this, but I just thought that I would just, in a stealth fashion, just listen to some of their conversations with one another so I could try to get to understand them better. And what came next was really an education. These were freshman kids, and what they were doing on their weekends was really crazy, some of them. And it was pretty apparent that some of their home situations were really very bad. And some of the adults in their lives were making really poor decisions. And it was just this massive eureka moment where I thought, here I am. I'm an adult. I'm trying to work my way into these kids' lives. It's rational on their part to be standoffish. And from that point forward, I became a lot more patient with those students. And I stopped trying to push so hard. And I also knew that I was a friendly person, and winning over these kids was going to take a lot longer than I anticipated. And if I was just cool and just kept a positive attitude and didn't take things personally, I could do that. And that was one of the most magical semesters of my life, because by Christmas I was darn close to those kids. And it was just this switch that I had to flip, because you've been in the classroom, you know that those kids are like mirror images of you. And if you're uptight, they're uptight. If you come on too strong, they come on too strong. So there's two. You need to become more approachable. You need to take your ego out of the equation and just be patient. And then the last thing I'm going to tell you is if you really want to set up a good atmosphere in your classroom, you need to can sarcasm. Just get rid of it. It's poison in the classroom. Canning sarcasm is a bit of a blanket statement, and obviously you have to use some judgment. I mean, I've certainly done it. I'm not trying to become too Zen-like on this. I'll never forget one time, it was early in my teaching career, there's this dude, I was sitting in his class, observing him, and this kid didn't have his homework assignment. Typical scenario. And instead of the teacher saying, well, tell me what happened, why don't you have it? He said, why, in a very accusatory way. And then the kid said, I was too busy talking to my girlfriend on the telephone. Mm. And then the teacher said, well, that's really going to prepare the America for the global economy. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, brother, give it a rest. Yeah. And so then the kid responded back in a sarcastic way. And I thought, you've set up a pretty confrontational situation here.
Oh, yeah.
But what worried me, Terry, was I bet you that teacher reinforced some insecurities that kid already had about himself.
Yeah.
And granted, he has the cocky, exterior, nothing bothers me. But in his head, he might have been saying, oh, wow, maybe it's true. Maybe I am stupid, or maybe I am irresponsible. And so I'll never forget that. And I'm not going to come off too Zen-like, because I've done the sarcastic route too. I think that your example was pretty cool, like where the kids are saying, of course you have to take notes. I guess it's something you just have to, you have to harness in positive.
Yeah, it depends on your personality, and it also depends on the level of trust that you've already established with the students, and it depends on the relationships you have with the students. So I can say that if you trust the students and they trust you, and you've got a history of a relationship that's nurturing, and they know that you care, and if you use sarcasm in a funny way that's not attacking, I will say, and if everything is perfect, I think it can be a decent way, even sometimes a really entertaining and fun way, to lighten up the mood in the classroom and kind of build some expectations. That being said, I have to agree, though, that I think a lot of times, first of all, to get it all perfect, I mean, why? Like, I mean, you might be able to make everything perfect and it might work, but the downside is there are going to be times where you thought that you were just slick and entertaining and everybody got the point, and you really hurt a kid's feelings. Yeah. And so, it's probably not the best idea, but it's one of my, it's a habit of mine I need to break, I think.
Hey, you know what? Join the crowd, man. Like I said, I don't want to come off too Zen-like. I'll tell you one other thing that I see that, one of my things is, you can only control what your actions, obviously. And in terms of building this relationship with students, I mean, students do mean things to you all the time as a teacher. They can be very cold. They can be very dismissive. They can be very sarcastic. And, so you have to check your ego and watch your emotions all the time. One other thing that I see out of teachers, and I'm not talking about just old teachers like me, I see this out of, 25-year-old teachers, is one of the things that you can do that really separates you from your students and doesn't allow you to connect is you can be nostalgic. You asked a question earlier about what was it like to teach in the 1980s. Well, I have some people my age that look at the kids today and think they're a mess. and I think that's typical. I have to read you this quote, man. It's just perfect for this. I see no hope for the future of our people if they are dependent on the frivolous youth of today. For certainly all youth are reckless beyond words. When I was a boy, we were taught to be discreet and respectful of elders, but the present youth are exceedingly wise and impatient of restraint. Now, that certainly seems like a contemporary complaint about young people, That came from 700 BCE. Hesiod, the poet of ancient Greece. And this is a society that's on the way up. This is 200 years prior to the Parthenon being built. So here's a society that's going straight up, that seems to have its act together. And here's the prominent person in Athens talking about how screwed up young people are. So whenever I hear like complaints about the current generation, I lay that little quote on them, and I think it's great truth in it.
Yeah, I got to agree. I think a lot of the problems that teachers have with students in schools and in classrooms are when we talk about the word disruption.
Yeah.
And what happens a lot is the student is disrupting the teaching and learning process, or they are disrupting the classroom. And I don't want to be too liberal, I guess, but I will say that a lot of the things that students are disrupting probably need disrupting. And a lot of these processes and ways that we do things, if we had that student in a forest, or if we had that student backpacking, or if we had that student running a business, or if we had that student in a different situation, all of those character traits that are so problematic, quote unquote, in the classroom might find some utility in these other circumstances. So I think that's an issue too.
That's brilliant. And I'm going to tell you something, my man. I'm going to piggyback on what you just said. I had a student recently that was a very difficult kid for me to interact with. Very racist kid, and was pretty upfront in his racism, which was jarring to say the least. Mm-hmm. But here he is, a student in my class, and my goal is to teach him. But I personally struggled with him. I mean, like on a personal level. But what you just said is so important. You said if a student is disrupting, it's probably something that needs disrupted. So.
Not always, but yeah.
I probably couldn't have done this when I was a younger person. I know I couldn't have done this as a younger person. I approached this student as my teacher, as my guide into shortcomings I had, into I always checked for ways that I might have been treating him unfairly, or ways that I might have been discouraging him or belittling him in any way, shape, or ways I might have been setting him up. And boy, it was an interesting self-evaluation process I went through. So I agree with you 1,000% on what you just said. And I think if educators can take that attitude instead of getting mad and defensive, they're going to grow.
It can be difficult because it does challenge your own your skills and expertise and classroom management and all that other sort of things. I mean, part of this on a broad level is, yes, maybe the education system or this curriculum or this content area or whatever, maybe all of this collectively does need disrupting. But right here, right now with this lesson today, how do I handle this kid? So philosophically, yes, it needs disrupting, but on a practical level, how am I supposed to respond? And in terms of building relationships with students, one of the best, there's lots of things that you can do. You can have a short memory. You can ignore certain misbehaviors. You can assume the best and use positive presuppositions. There's lots of ways that you can kind of encourage students in certain directions. But the more flexible you are, and I guess the more imagination and vision you have as a teacher, I think the more malleable and that you are in your classroom is and your environment is, more students will fit within that framework because you're flexible and because things are malleable. And the more limited your expertise and skills are, and the more limited your vision is of what a classroom should be and could be, the more you're going to have that challenge by students, and then there are going to be problems. And if you're the authority figure, then you're going to quote unquote win, which means the students are going to lose in more ways than one.
When I first started teaching, my first week on the job, I learned a powerful lesson about what you just said. Social studies class, I was 24 years old. I was loaded with testosterone, Terry. It was just testosterone, certainty, everything a young man has. And we were talking about a controversial subject in class. And a rookie teacher, young teacher, I felt compelled for some odd reason to give them my opinion on this controversial topic. And, I look back on that experience and I would say probably, geez, 75 to 80% of that student population was totally on board with what I was saying. They were like, go, Mr. Sturtevant, we're with you. Class ends, this young woman comes up to me and she said, you know, Mr. Sturtevant, I don't agree with you, and you should be careful about promoting your views too much. And of course, you know, I had to defend myself and explain to her again I was right. She leaves class, and within 5 seconds, Terry, I was like, oh gosh, she was right and I was wrong in this situation. Why would I alienate like a certain portion of my student population by, you know, promoting my views on this controversial topic? So she came in the next day and I made over and told her how, you know, I learned from her and she was my hero and all that stuff. But you know, you need to be darn careful as the teacher to not promote your views too much. I mean, the goal is to help them think, not to indoctrinate them. And that's another thing that can happen that can really separate you from you and your students.
I've experienced teaching in a rural district in Kentucky, and
Mm-hmm.
religion. I was teaching out there, a very, very, very right-wing conservative
Right.
environment, and I was teaching there when Obama was elected.
Yeah.
And that was
that
ugly.
That was one of the problems I had with this student. I mean, some of the things he said about President Obama were just way off base. I mean, just terrible.
I had a letter. Well, first of all, and this is a really bright, articulate, and nice, sweet student. I mean, not somebody that was, you know, that I had any trouble with at all. But when I mentioned Obama, and what I basically said is, I thought, regardless of the political ideology, that I thought it was a step in the right direction for America to have leadership other than a white male. That's what I said.
Yeah.
Well,
I got him going.
oh my word! The students had been gone 45 minutes, and my phone started lighting up, and emails started piling up. And the next day, the sweet student came in with a letter, and I'd mentioned at some point with the students that I was a Christian. I'm an English teacher. Why would I talk about Christianity, really? You know, in the interest of being human, I mentioned that I was Christian. So the letter comes the next day, that biblical scripture that said that something about the fruits of the tree will bear the truth, or something to that effect, implying that I wasn't a Christian. And then said, I'll never forget this line. It said, Obama is a dirty Muslim baby killer who deserves to burn in hell. And when I looked at that sentence, and I looked at this sweet student whose mother had written this, and I was so confused. It really made me sort of...
That's chilling, man.
Yeah, it made me really, I guess, sort of reconsider a lot, like how much I really didn't understand and how important our jobs were, but at the same time how relatively impotent we are as teachers, because there are powerful beliefs and visions of oneself as a student, as a person, and these students bring all of this complexity to the classroom, and boy, do we oversimplify all that in the interest of standards mastery. And I think that's maybe one way that personalized learning can, that's one gap that personalized learning can heal, is really considering this student in this place, and what do they need to know, and how can I help them come to know it. Because I think, you know, there's some benefits to having a really standardized curriculum and with so many different backstories. You know, we all have, it's kind of a meeting place. But, I'm not sure that approach has been real successful over the last 20 years. So as jarring as that sentence was, it really, to me, underscored the need to have a much more personalized learning experience. And certainly that starts with relationships.
That's an amazing story, sir. I mean, you hang on to that for your whole career. That's intense.
It was, yeah.
I like I told you, the class that I teach, we don't talk about Christianity. We don't talk about Western Europe, and that stirs the pot. That ruffles some feathers. It's an elective course, so no one's forced to come in here. But I've had those questions too. I think I've been through over 10,000 students. I have not had one student convert to another faith as a result of my class. and I saw on the news the other day where some poor teacher got threatened with removal because she had her students do an arabesque assignment, and the kids wrote the Shahada, there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is prophet. It was kind of like, hey, I want to show you how intricate it is to do arabesque writing, and people freaked out. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, none of those kids are going to be hurt by this, and they're going to grow from it, and none of them are going to convert to Muslims as a result of this. I can guarantee you that.
Learning should be affecting. It should agitate.
Yeah.
It should encourage and promote some dissonance. If it doesn't shake and fracture and irritate and annoy a little bit, what are we doing here? We need to lighten up, I think.
Well, that was such a good story you told, and a chilling story. Oh man!
And again, a great student. And you know what? For the next 2 weeks, I think she was embarrassed by the letter. But yeah, she didn't say much to me for the next 2 or 3 weeks, and I didn't. I just read the letter, and I don't even remember how I responded. But yeah, those are the challenges in building relationships with students. You can't let things like that deter you, because it's not always going to be pretty. It's not always going to be, when you want to break down walls. Well, sometimes the walls were there. From a social and cultural perspective, they're there for convenience. They're there to lubricate certain social interactions. And so when you start asking those to come down, or at least become transparent, what you see and what results isn't always going to go like you planned, and it isn't always going to be comfortable, but it's certainly a lot more authentic.
And Terry, that teacher, that student was a great teacher of yours, right?
Oh yeah.
She impacted you. You had to change. You had to figure out, okay, how do I manage this new obstacle or responsibility? And so you grew from the situation.
I absolutely did. Relationships are, if they're truly relationships, they're at least dialogic and two-way, and reciprocating and mutually. They're balanced. It's not top down, or it's not a relationship. It's just it's an association.
Terry, I want to say one more thing. I know we're moving on here time-wise, but this will resonate with you and anyone who's listening. And this shows you the importance of what we're talking about. My freshman year of college, I went to Muskingum University, small college, small university out in eastern Ohio. Humanities guy. It's fall of 1979, my freshman year, and I have to take this science class. Because it's liberal arts. I'm like, oh gosh, I don't want to take science. So I looked to find the easiest science class in the catalog, and it was geology, which we called rocks for jocks. So I go walking into geology, and I just didn't want to take the class. I had no interest. I just hated the concept of being in this class. So this guy walks in, the professor. He's about 5'4". He's got a beard down to his navel. He's got this long stringy hair. He's wearing a flannel shirt back when teachers dressed up. He walks up to the podium, and he said, teaching geology has gotten me into a lot of trouble in my marriage. Like, okay, where's this headed? Because to me, a blink of an eye is 5 million years. So it's really hard for me to be excited about being 15 minutes late to meet my wife. Now, that instance, I thought to myself, oh gosh, this guy might be pretty funny. We would walk into class and he'd say, hey, Sturtevant, what'd you do over the weekend? And then you'd have to tell him, and then you would get into this interesting conversation. Within 1 month, Terry, this class that I dreaded so much became my favorite class. That tells you about the power of these student-teacher relationships. It can transform attitudes about what you're teaching. It can empower kids. It can change lives. So, when we start talking about all the, pedagogy and content and all those things, we cannot lose track of the fact that this is a people business, and that's what I'm all about.
The relationships for me, that's what I miss most about teaching, because I haven't been in the classroom now for, I think this is my 3rd year out of the classroom.
Right.
And, that's absolutely what I miss the most. I miss the kids. It's brutal, real bad. But, the relationships made the job fun. There was a lot of challenges, and I was in love with, and I continued to be in love with my content and pedagogy and all that other stuff that the teacher nerd in me really likes. But it's the relationships that really make it not necessarily worthwhile, but fun, and certainly worthwhile. But it's for a lot of kids. They always say they may not remember anything you've taught, but they'll always remember the way you made them feel. And
that's beautiful.
Yeah, and certainly I think that's true. They may not remember much of anything that you've taught, no matter how well designed it was, and all the best practices that you used, and all the data in the world. They may remember you and how you modeled curiosity, and how you modeled compassion, and how you gave and provided more than one opportunity, and how you maybe were the most stable thing in their life. These are the things that stay with them, and that's not some sort of side benefit. Those are human and those are human needs and necessities. That's probably more important. That's not just a supplement or a complement, but that's at the core of what these students need from us.
And they might remember it better if they put it into context. I read some of your website.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's the power of place. Yeah. Right. That it's humanizing.
Yeah. Hey, listen. You probably had an experience like mine, didn't you? You probably had a class in high school or elementary school or college where you're like, oh, geez, I'm not going to like this class. And then you ended up meeting this really cool teacher and the class came to life for you.
And usually it was content areas that I didn't like. I'm not really much of a math person, but I remember almost all of my math teachers, Mr. Kincaid and Mrs. Dunn and Mr. Stewart. I can remember all, but my English teachers, I can remember a handful of, and I'm an English guy.
Yeah.
So I've had lots of those. That's something that concerns me a little bit with technology. And I know that it's not an either or, like either great teachers or technology. I know that's not the case at all. As a matter of fact, it might be the opposite. But this idea that the more technology we have, the more it gives students direct access to content and to outside experts and communities. And these are all fantastic, but I would like to see these things certainly the teachers maybe need to be decentered, but they don't need to be de-emphasized. So
that's beautiful. And let me piggyback off that some. One thing about kids is a lot of learning takes place that has nothing to do with what's going on in the classroom. You need to navigate how to deal with a bully. You need to navigate how to get up in front of, up on stage and sing a solo. You need to navigate how to run down on kickoff and hit somebody that's bigger than you. There's a big part of the learning process that takes place in schools that has nothing to do with a standardized test or a learning target. And we'll lose all that if they're isolated on their Chromebooks.
I mean, I don't think this is a caution against technology, but I certainly think that we need to look at technology like we do anything else. It's a matter of design, but we also have to be willing as educators to lose our egos. And so I don't know, just talking about it just really sort of emphasizes the complexity of really great teaching. Being a decent teacher isn't that difficult, but being a really good or great teacher, I've flown airplanes, and I've won state level chess tournaments, and I've published books, and I've done all this crap, but teaching by far is the most challenging thing I've ever done.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, there's so many moving parts, and really I think it's not so much the moving parts as it is the where it all ends up. It ends up in the mind and the heart of a student, and that's really, really intimidating. And so
you need to get back in the classroom, my man.
I know it's not that simple, but then we want to talk about that. We need to talk about hiring practices and the size of districts and how they hire and place teachers, and it's just so complex because basically we're mixing hearts and affections and curiosities with content, with government processes and policies, and it's just a mess. But somehow the students make it okay.
I have no doubt that it's going to be a lot different in 20 years. And one of the reasons why I am hesitant to leave is because I'm kind of like in the middle, like at the middle of a good book here. I hate to put it down because education is transforming in very interesting ways.
I'm 40, And my wife and I just decided to have I decided to have our fourth child. I had to kind of twist her arm a little bit, and I didn't want to have another kid because this idea of being a father at 60, I mean, I guess of course you're a father the rest of your life, but having a teen in the house when I'm almost 60, I thought, man, that's kind of rough. And then I thought, what else am I going to do? Like, what else am I going to do that's going to be like, am I going to sit on a beach? I'm not going to sit on a beach, and I'm not going to sit in a chair and watch TV. What else am I going to do? Might as well do something worthwhile.
Sometimes I wished I was a little older when I had my kids. I think I would have been a better parent.
Oh yeah, I feel bad for my first kid.
I feel bad for my first students, my first kid.
The first class, and you think I thought I was so good, and in hindsight, it was a train wreck.
Yeah, that's right, my man.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your time today, James.
Yeah, it's been wonderful, Terry.
Yeah, where can listeners find out more about you?
I'm going to give you the spelling of my name via the NATO alphabet.
All right, sounds good.
Because I found it's actually a time saver. My website is James Allen, that's Alan, and Sturtevant is spelled S as in Sam, T as in Tango, U as in Uniform, R as in Romeo, T as in Tango, E as in Echo, V as in Victor, A as in Alpha, N as in November, T as in Tango. JamesAllenSturtevant.com. You can follow me on Twitter at James Sturtevant. My book is called You've Got to Connect, like the contraction you have, got to connect, Gotta. It's available on Amazon. It's available on Kindle. And my email is P as in Papa, J as in, I don't know the NATO designation for J. J as
Juliet.
in
It's Juliet.
There we go. Yeah. P as in Papa, J as in Juliet, Sturtevant at gmail.com. And if you contact me, I guarantee I'll get back to you. I love meeting people.
Great. James, it's been a wonderful conversation today. We did run a little bit over on time, but what are we going to do anyway? Go shop in the rain.
Christmas shop, yeah.
I'm going to go Christmas shopping in the rain. Have a wonderful afternoon, James.
Yes, sir.
That'll do it for today. Thanks for listening. If you didn't hate it, please give us a quick review on iTunes. We record weekly and sometimes multiple episodes per week. Questions? Email us at podcast@teachthought.com or find us on the Teach Thought Twitter account @TeachThought.